Conquer the Noise is a podcast produced by Unconquered, an independent agency challenging brand perspective through redefined content. This podcast is dedicated to telling stories of outstanding ideas and people who have found their way amongst the chatter. Welcome. I'm Jonathan Hansen, Chief Creative Officer at Unconquered, and I'm your host of Cultivating Purpose and Passion in Business. Today, we're speaking with Jenni Tilton-Flood, dairy farmer and owner-operator at Flood Brothers Farm, and member of the dairy co-op of Cabot Creamery. Jenni, that's a very long intro for you. You're a woman of many talents. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And that sounds like a lovely title, but here at the farm, I generally go under the auspices of somebody. Somebody is needed to do something. That's who they call on me.
Well, you're an advocate, dairy farmer, mechanic when need be, spokesperson, mother. How do you have time for all of this?
So first of all, I don't. Just like any other person who's trying to balance family, life, work, trying to achieve balance is probably one of the biggest mistakes anyone can ever make. Just trying to achieve some sort of ability to not make too many waves and not be overcome by the waves. So I have to split it up. I can't multitask all the time. I'm not always perfect. I do not always have I don't have the Pinterest life. I don't have an Instagram life. I do Instagram, but it's usually not so pretty. But I do what I love, and I love what I do. And that makes it all seem like I can fit 28 hours into 24.
Well, you have a very robust Twitter. I spent some time going through it. I was pretty impressed at how active you are, and seemed very focused too. So it seems like you're very into advocacy, trying to get out, the message of people who might be not heard. What are some of the other things you're really focusing on your Twitter and trying to bring into conversation?
Well, I mean, I like Twitter and I love the idea of having a conversation, but I sometimes feel that Twitter is my chance to yell into the canyon or scream into my pillow. And that's probably one of the blessings of Twitter and probably one of the curses of Twitter, because there are some people who do scream into the chasm, and you really don't like what they say. And sometimes I'm sure I'm abrasive and don't say the things that people want to hear. But honestly, I feel that there are people out there who don't have access to Twitter, or people out there who should be listening harder. And if I hear something that needs to be repeated, or I see something that needs to be seen, then I feel that it's incumbent upon me to actually share it. And I change, I morph, I grow, I learn. And that's probably one of the biggest things I do is I learn. And I learn a lot when I open my mouth. I learn a lot when I shut it and let my eyes do some reading, let my body and my mind consume information and experience. So
your blog was really personal. Like, I was really moved by your blog. I spent some time on it. It hasn't been updated in a little bit. I imagine because, again, you're so busy. But for people who are interested, I found it like an open diary, and I really respect that. And you have 7,000 or 8,000 subscribers to it, which I think is a testament to the vulnerability and the realness you're putting out there.
Well, thank you very much. I'm kind of shocked to hear that. It's kind of like a private space. If I could have done it anonymously or thought to do it anonymously, I probably would have, but that would have kind of been hypocritical, I think. And it did come to a little bit of a standstill. Throughout the course of about 18 months, we had somewhere around 5 or 6 tragic deaths within our friends and family. Everything from
I'm sorry to hear that.
Addiction to life being at an end because it's been a long, good one, to people taking their own lives. And I will say that it got really hard to sit down and take the time to write. And it's one of the things I have struggled with, getting behind a camera and taking pictures again and sharing it and writing. But I feel that if I have a voice, I should be using it. And if I have thoughts and I see things that I think people need to know about, then it is not just incumbent, but my responsibility as a person, as a human, as a member of community, to say these things, to provoke thought, to provoke discourse, and to dissent. I'm a big fan of dissenting when it's required.
Hmm. You know, it's you really buck the stereotype of what I think people think of a dairy farmer or farmer. You know, I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in St. Louis. You know, I've been on farms. I have friends that grew up on farms. You know, my best friend married into a farming family. You know, it's very it's you know it's not out of the norm. It doesn't feel foreign to me. But do think there's a lot of stereotypes that come with it, especially even when you're growing up in that world. Um, do you how have you like fought those stereotypes?
Oh, every day, all day,
Yeah, I
and
bet.
not just off the farm, but on the farm. I mean, I was the first generation in my family on both sides that wasn't born on a farm, but I kind of straddled farm and non-farm because my dad was the John Deere guy. So I grew up in the area, in, with dirt, with crops, with cows, but I always thought there was something different about it. I didn't think it was the norm. And I think that allowed me, when I came back to it, to bring what wasn't the norm in. And I've always been a fan of nonconformity, that was sincere and innate, as
Hmm.
opposed to put upon. and
Hmm.
and yeah, so it is difficult, sometimes in the rooms with the dairy farmers. I am not the stereotype, and some stereotypes are exaggerated. There are lots of people who are dairy farmers throughout this country and throughout this world who have opinions that sound more like mine, who don't fit a stereotype that has become comfortable for people to recognize, um, that they do buck the system. And in a lot of cases, the system and the stereotype really is a figment of imagination, a
Hmm.
caricature, a bucolic image, or a minority.
Hmm.
So it's just a matter of amplifying voices and amplifying discourse.
Hmm. So you mentioned you weren't born into off onto a farm or into the like sort of farming lifestyle. It's something that has come to you later in life. Um, how did that evolve? Were you on another career path before this and decided to um, pivot and do something else, or how'd that happen?
Well, I always think of, my pivot being something that I was pivoted. I don't think that I decided and changed course. I always wanted to leave my little old town. I grew up on the town line of Sydney and Oakland, Maine. Two map dots, one smaller than the other, and both of them smaller than most map dots. Um, and I always wanted to. I just couldn't wait to get out and leave. And from an early age, what I wanted to do was go off and feed the world. I wanted to go to some war-torn country and solve problems, make sure kids were fed, bring peace. This is what I wanted to do. And when I finally left after graduation and a little bit of a gap semester, um, I remember crossing the bridge from Maine to New Hampshire, and I got out of my car, I did a little dance. I was never going back. I was changing the world. If I had a beret, I would have tossed it up in the air because I was a big Mary Tyler Moore fan.
Hmm.
Um, and then I studied international relations and comparative foreign policy, and this was my jam. This was it for me. It was fascinating. It was amazing. It fired me up. I worked with organizers who were dissenting and striking and protesting, and I felt so, for the first time, so powerful and so like I was creating change and doing something, except it all felt wrong, and I didn't know what was wrong. And I was thinking and thinking and thinking about it, and all I wanted to do was, I didn't want to feed the world. I wanted to feed my corner of it, and I didn't know how to do that. And I literally had a conversation with one of my professors, who is just an amazing woman, and she she was the person I aspired to be. And she's like, you have to do what your heart tells you. And she says, I could tell you all day long why you should stay on this path. But she said, that's not the right choice to make. And so I decided to come home and work for my dad's business, selling farm equipment and being a parts girl and finding a way to be a part of agriculture. I never saw myself as someone who was a farmer per se. I just knew that I was going to be involved in agriculture. And even back then in the early 90s, I knew that agriculture had room for so many different ways to be a part of it. So, and that's how I got to ag. And then I delivered parts, and the farmer's son kind of picked it up from there.
So I think what I find interesting about people who love food or want to work in food, and I say this because I have a personal connection to it as well, but it's very nurturing, right? I think the idea of feeding someone is very much like that goes back to like nurturing instinct. Do you consider yourself a nurturer or a caregiver, or is that what sort of feeds into that a little bit?
I think so. I mean, when I look at what we do, and when I thank people for letting us live our dream and make our way of life the way we make our living, I'm always thanking them for trusting us to put food on their table. That is amazing to me, is that people actually come up to me and they're like, I bought your cheese today. We're drinking your milk. Which products do we buy to make sure that we're feeding your food to our family? And that makes me feel like I'm, nourishing my community from the inside out. And that's the why, that's why we all have to find a why. And for me, it's like, I'm doing something that means something, and I'm nourishing people's soul, I'm nourishing their mind, and I'm making sure they can get up in the morning and worry about something other than what to eat. I've taken that off the table by putting it on their table.
I think of farming, I think of like the different roles you're in, and they don't seem to me as like careers. They seem more of like a lifestyle. What are your thoughts on that? I would love to hear you talk through that, because I mean, you sound like you're on a very career focused path before, and now you've sort of embraced a very more like way of life. It's really wrapped into identity and everything like that.
It really is, and there's so many positives and so many negatives about being wrapped up in this idea. But I always refer to it as a way of life that just so happens to be the way we make our living. And the reason is because while it just is I never think of it as a career, because I can't fathom, because in my head, a career is going someplace every day and doing a set job with a job description that comes with all these requirements. I admire the people who can do that. I admire people who set goals and this path of promotion and achievement. And I'm like, I don't know that I could do it. On the other hand, I don't know how each day is going to turn out. I'm at the whim and fancy of all the other family members here at the farm, 3,400 cows and Mother Nature, the vagaries and wanderings of the market, trade, diplomacy, all of that affects my everyday in a very personal way. But I still have the same things to do. It doesn't matter if all of that goes to hell. We are still going to have to take care of our cows and take care of our land and take care of each other. And so it doesn't feel like a career. I don't know what the perfect word for it is. And that being said, I think that's where we get a lot of issues with.
There's the sounds of farm life. I have New York City in the background. I have hammers and horns and sirens, and that sounded like a ATV or a.
It was a very angry Harley.
Or a Harley. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess, when we're talking about finding farmers who need to possibly develop a different path, a different way to make a living, I think that's one of the reasons it's so hard to leave farming behind.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may think that rural folk are just too stubborn or aren't willing to open their mind, but it is very hard to separate that identity and that sense of belonging and that sense of doing and that rooted feeling that permeates every aspect of your life. And just, it's not a career switch, it's an
Mm-hmm.
entire life switch. So it is very monumental
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah, and
overwhelming.
I can imagine. You touched on a lot of different stuff that I want to get into later on. But when I was looking through everything and reading a bit about what you're doing and the efforts you've made, one thing that really stood out to me is like this, or like I said, I guess you could say a theme, was community, and like building it, whether it's, uh, you know, the generations of the Flood family on the farm, and now your kids are involved, to the outreach you're doing, and feeding people. I think that all kind of feeds into this greater idea of a greater good for community. And at the start of this, where I think where a lot of this starts, is in some ways is going back to like the idea of like a dairy co-op, and how excuse me, Cabot has really embraced that. And so for people who don't know what a co-op is or how a dairy co-op functions, like what's your role in this greater dairy process, and how these farms come together?
Oh, that's really a great question because we say co-op and it has so many different meanings. But for me as a dairy farmer and a member of the Cabot Creamery Cooperative, what it means is first and foremost, our farm is an owner. We are one of 800 plus farm families throughout New England and New York that own Cabot. We are the owners. The board of directors are made up of dairy farmers. My director for my region actually is in the same town that I live in. So, and all 5 of the dairy farms in our town are Cabot Creamery Cooperative farmer owners. We're a very plaid town, I tell people. But what our co-op is it provides us the opportunity to be a group of owners that are steering a ship in very, very difficult waters, as opposed to one small boat all by
Mm-hmm.
itself trying to
Mm-hmm.
keep up with the fleet. And that is a comfort. That is salvation, and that is opportunity. And opportunity is one of the things that those of us in agriculture and farming least have. Usually we don't have options. Usually we don't have choices. But by being a strong group, a farmer-driven grassroots organization that is running and controlling as much of our destiny as we can by providing opportunities, by taking advantage of scale as many together instead of just one, that provides opportunity, and that provides the option for us to do real good things. And not just for our farms, not just for our company and our food, but as a company working specifically to improve our communities. And that's one of the reasons I'm so proud that our co-op is a B Corp. And, we are able to take what happens on the farm, where our farmers are part of their communities, either by putting food on the table, or by providing the members for the school board or the volunteer fire department, which happens in so many on our Cabot farms, or by just making sure that we are supporting good causes. And we're doing that in a way at a corporate level, through our sustainability efforts that echoes what goes on our farms, because our farms are sustainable. They are always overachieving at that and always in motion to achieve it. So, achieving that as a corporation makes it special too.
So how does like the being a certified B Corp at the corporate level trickle down into the farm level and the production side of it?
So it actually doesn't trickle down. It trickled up.
Okay.
It was
Trickled up.
yes, the way our farms are, the way they're rooted in their communities, their society, the way they are caring for the land, the way they are focused on sustainability, the way that our co-op could do that and echo that that effort was to be a B Corp. And and that B Corp is, that means we have amazing partners, we have amazing peers, and we get to lead the way. I mean, we're the first dairy cooperative in the world to achieve B Corp status and certification. And it means a lot to me. I'm very proud of it when I talk to people, because sometimes people look at a brick of cheese and think it's just a brick of cheese. And if you've had Cabot cheese, it's no just brick of cheese. It's damn fine, and it's won
fantastic.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's won every major taste award, but it stands for a lot. It stands for, the profits going directly back to farmers like me. That's another benefit of being a co-op owner. And it stands for, a secure footing in not only meeting the standards of sustainability and environmental conservation and community involvement, but leading the way, whether it's regarding women in the workplace, whether it's regarding goal setting and trying things that are new just to make things better, that sort of thing. So it's a trickle up, and it's a spread it all around type of thing. That's what B Corp is.
No, you've mentioned sustainability already, which is great, because sustainability really is beyond just environmental efforts. It's a word with a lot of different meanings and can apply to a lot of different things. And you touched on it a little bit earlier when speaking to dairy farming as a business, and I have to even wonder that. Is that a sustainable business right now? And I ask that because of the expense that you incur for infrastructure, the amount of labor and hours you have to put in. You are working in a market that you aren't really setting your prices. And so, I imagine there are months when you're breaking even. Maybe there's months when you're making a little money, and there's probably months when you're losing money. So, for me, like, I wonder, how is farming sustainable? How is that going to be a sustainable practice going into our future? Because it's obviously a huge backbone to our country and our food system, but also one that seems like it's one of the most difficult.
It is. I mean, one, it is hard. Two, it is an amazing life if it's what you want. It can be better. Is it sustainable? It is. It's done. The principles of sustainability are multiple, and it's, as you touched on, it requires financial stability. Do we have that? Not necessarily. Do we have to maybe find different ways of providing that financial stability? Yes, because we're also balancing, making sure that, on the other hand, we are making certain that we are caring for our land, caring for our animals, if the animals are part of it, and that from the farm to the plate, that there is a responsibility to make sure that things being done are done correctly and change to with the knowledge that we gain along the way as to what is best. Do I think that it can always be sustainable? I think it can, but it's going to require change. It would be incredibly easy to be sustainable in agriculture and dairy farming if the price of milk was way higher for a consumer. However, would that be sustainable for the people who are buying the milk? The same way with any food product. We do enjoy one of the markers of judging how well a country or nation is running and working is how affordable is the food. That affordability has nothing to do with the cost of production. That affordability has to do with the ability for people who are working and living in that community and that society to be able to access and afford and have available to them that food. So it's kind of hard to judge sustainability in fiscal terms on a farm when the whole goal is to make sure that affordability and availability is commonplace for those who may not be achieving or able to grab from the marketplace the true value of their work. There are millions and millions of Americans who work hard every single day. They put in the hours, multiple jobs. They're lucky if they can make rent. Their cost of living is extremely high. So we have to make sure that they can have food available. And And there are people who make plenty of money that do not like to pay much money for their food, and that's okay too. Does that mean that we can eschew a responsibility on the agricultural side? No. No. Makes it hard to balance the books. Makes it hard to understand. It's why we have a labyrinth of government programs, and there are people who take advantage of it, but there are people who take advantage of programs on the other side too. It doesn't mean the program should go away. It means that we need to step up to the plate and be better at what we do on all sides, in my humble opinion.
You touched on access a little bit, and I think that's really important to speak to a bit, and especially within the framework of community in your decision making process. So I'm really curious to how when you're making these decisions at the production level, like what are you thinking of? How are you putting that in consideration with the greater community? Because I know, for example, during the pandemic, I saw reports on the news of dairy farmers having to flush milk, and then there was a call to arms, if you will, of the public now stepping in and helping distribute some of that, or at least organizing, right? So I would really love to hear hear your thoughts on that.
So it is tough. I mean, for a dairy farmer like me, I produce a raw product. I produce, I don't produce it. I help my cows produce it. We have a raw product that is required. We take care of it, ensure its quality and safety, and then the truck comes, takes it to the plant where it's bottled. I don't control it after it leaves the farm. And the weaknesses of efficiency came to light during the pandemic, the black swan of all supply systems and supply chains. Demand was high. In some places, the efficiency of our system once the milk left the farm to make sure it provided the product specifically required somewhere, whether it was congregate feeding sites or congregate appropriate food by packaging or product, or, destination for restaurants, which all closed. It left only a small pool of processing available to handle the milk that we had. That meant that some farms had nowhere to put their milk. I wish it was as easy as just simply handing it out. It's not for our product, especially. And I have a friend or an acquaintance who does eggs, and she really just could not understand our failure she's capable of doing it. She told me over and over again, when she has too many eggs, she takes them to the food pantry. And my response was, yes, you're taking the eggs. But in order to make a true analogy between my milk coming out of my cows into my tanks, getting it to where it's needed, that would be you not delivering eggs, but delivering cheese omelets ready-made and prepackaged, which adds a layer that she hadn't really anticipated. And that, I think, brought it home. So are there problems? Yes. Is it unfathomable? A little bit. Is it regrettable? Incredibly. Is it shameful? Yes. Hell yes. Are we going to fix it? I hope so. Unfortunately, as a dairy farmer, it's out of my control. I know that my co-op's processing did everything they could, from taking people who are used to doing other jobs, sitting at desks or marketing, managing webs, social managing, things like that. They're actually working on the line. They're actually the ones being trained and helping to secure and make safe the workspaces through this crisis. And making sure it's working with the people we supply and our customers and saying, what do you need most? And focusing on getting that to them. And they were able to do that. When it comes to fluid milk, that nimbleness, that ability to do that for logistical, practical, and I'll say it, probably because of profit, wasn't done as well as it could have been done. And I'm hoping it does change. My power to do so pretty much stops with me rattling cages and saying things like this. But it is upsetting. And it happened all throughout agriculture. It wasn't just milk.
You're right. Yeah.
And it happened with a lot of things, but it it's so noticeable with milk. It's just, you see it going down the drain. And
Well, that's the images you see, right? It's almost it's
Mhm.
kind of sensational almost, because you just see these huge tankers just sort of like flushing milk. So I think there is that level of drama that people attach to immediately.
Right.
One of the things that I found really interesting and didn't realize about dairy farming is the supply chain, and how in order for you to really run and operate, there's a reliance of other people down that aren't really known or spoken about. So you got to feed the cows. You got to what else is going into it? What are some of these other supply chain issues that you're experiencing right now?
So, I mean, in order to get milk on the shelf for people, it's one of the most untouched items and food items, but it is the one that is worked on and handled the most by the most people, I think, because of the scrutiny and because all the work that goes into securing it. It's one of the most regulated foods. But I mean, we, from veterinarians to salespeople to repair people, for everything from computers and software to air conditioning to cooling and heating, sanitation, all of those things are necessary. But when it comes to push and shove, like through this crisis, little things mean a lot. Being able to we use nitrile gloves all the time. That's one of the that's how we secure and make sure that our milk's clean, and the people handling our cows and the cows' udders are clean. That's a commodity that was in high demand. Making sure that we could get that. On the other spectrum, we have 2 public restrooms for our employees here on the farm. I need to keep them stocked with hand soap and with toilet paper and paper towels. I go through a lot of them, finding those things. Little things like, as much as we're always cleaning and disinfecting everything that the milk touches and the cows, making sure high touch areas were cleaned. It was difficult. I could not buy off the shelf because everybody else had bought all that. So being creative and finding other sources, what was necessary. Not, going to get parts has been different. It's, they leave them outside. And I think, while all of these things were manageable, and even here in Maine, we had power outages due to a storm that hit. So that was challenging as well. I think the biggest issue has been that because a lot of our farmers are isolated and we don't get off the farm much and we don't really experience the changes that everybody else has experienced. Like, our idea of lockdown was, we had to go through the drive-through at the coffee, to get coffee. It was very different than the experience of lockdown in New York City. And it was hard for them to understand that. But the traffic on the farm slowed, the sales calls slowed, and we joke a lot about how not having a salesperson every 5 minutes is kind of nice. But on the other hand, it's kind of hard. It's one more disconnection from society, one more disconnection from community. It's one less news source, one less communication. So, I mean, we adjusted. We had, I think, less of an adjustment than most people, but sourcing things has been just as difficult for us as it is for any person running a household or business.
So the farm has been around roughly 200 years. How many generations and how many people do you have currently working there?
So right now it's 6 families, 3 generations of them. We have 21 family members. Of those 21 family members, 11 of them are employed on the farm, and then we have the youngest, and the ones that aren't. There's only I think 2 adults who aren't working on the farm. The rest of those that aren't working on the farm are finding out whether they're going to be in school or not in school for the school year. We work with about 40 other employees, some of whom have been with us since they were teenagers. And we take care of 3,400 cows. We milk them 3 times a day. 1,700 of them get milked every day. They produce 17,000 gallons of milk that within 24 to 48 hours is on the store shelves and in our neighbors' fridges. And we do this every day. And we are just really lucky. I mean, our farm and our family has been on this land and on the banks of this river for over 200 years. We've been trusted by our community and our neighbors to sell milk to them since 1927. And my husband's grandfather, at the age of 14, decided that that's what he was going to do, is sell milk. So it's a tradition, it's a heritage, and one of the most exciting things about that is the future and how it's going to change. It's going to change the way we do business. It's going to change the way we operate, and we're okay with that. We're going to bring with it everything we've learned and recognized through the past 200 years.
And so, that's a great legacy. How are you managing and keeping the wheels spinning, and like, what do goals look like on a dairy farm? And how are you like making sure you're hitting that?
So every morning the goal is to get through the day. It's that big.
That's not uncommon for my goals as well.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's as different as it can be than any other way of life. It really is just the same. Just got to get through the day. Everyone jokes that farmers don't have weekends. I still celebrate Fridays just like everybody else. I may start celebrating on Thursday just like everybody else. And dread Mondays just like everybody else. But we do set goals. I mean, we have long range goals for the middle generation, the one that I'm a part of. My husband, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law. Our goals are that our kids have a choice. If they want to be a part of this, they can. If they don't have to. That's very important to us. And in between there, we have goals of making sure that what we're leaving behind and what we're giving them the opportunity and choice of is something they would want to choose and be proud of. By entering into a partnership and agreement with Summit Gas to invest in cow poop as a way of making renewable energy source. That's something we did just this week, signed on the dotted line, and we're going to make that happen. And that's something we're proud of. That's something that no one would have ever thought of doing in 1927. I mean, who would have thought you could do so much with cow poop, right? But we're not only going to be putting food on people's table, but renewable energy that comes from a good place that isn't, causing an end burn to somebody else's environment is going to help literally light the way for our communities. Those are the types of goals we set. But make sure everybody gets through the day. Make sure that people are safe. Make sure that our milk is the quality that we've come to expect and people trust. And make sure we do something a little bit better tomorrow. No matter what it is, we can always do something better. And I think that's something we try really hard to do.
Well, you definitely touched on that. I was looking forward to digging into the natural gas creation. I think that's really interesting. But before we jump into that, I'm really curious how this all plays in towards the future, right, for you and your family and generation. You talked to it a little bit by making sure people feel like they have options. But how are you shaping things at the farm in addition to, and I think it's an opportunity to speak to the natural gas creation, but how are you really shaping things there to help push things forward for the future generation?
So we learn a lot by watching older generations. We learn a lot about how to do things. We take notes on how not to do things. And it's just like anybody else. Anybody who's been involved in a family business knows that it is one of the most challenging balances ever, because you got to work with these people and you can't get uninvited from holiday dinners. So y'all got to sit down and be nice to each other. So we take these lessons on how we want to be. And this is the same as when you become a parent, you say, I'm never going to be that parent. And you always end up being that parent, and your kid's going to make the promise to not be that parent. But we do try to actually because it is a business, we can actually write things on a piece of paper and make it a legal document. We will not do this, or we will do this. But right now, what we're really focusing on is putting financial stability, making that a key cornerstone, as well as responsibility, making sure that it is written into our DNA from here on out that all of these things that we used to do because it was just seemed right, like making sure we protected the waterways and made sure the soil was taken care of. But we want to make sure that that's just, it's permanent. This is the way it is. We want to acknowledge it by entering into agreements and saying, okay, we'll let go of a little bit of control of this in order for a partnership to work, because we can't be all things in all places. And that's the biggest learning curve we've had, because there's this idea that someone can do it all. And there are people out there who can manage it, but we can't. Not healthy for us. It's not secure. So there are ways to do that and diversify the portfolio, diversify the people, and management. Those are the steps that we are taking to try and lay a groundwork for a future that might be a little bit more palatable and agreeable. And it was done before us as well. I mean, the older generation, when we made the decision to build a new parlor back about 7 or 8 years, 9 years ago, I think. 10? No, I guess it was 11 years. Sorry.
Time flies.
It really does. One of the big things was that generation wanted to make sure that those of us with younger kids, we had more time with them, because that's something they know they didn't have. So, I mean, each generation takes these little steps in little places that you don't think about, but that's how we goal. That's how we goal set. Other farms do a much better job of setting goals. I mean, they probably have colored spreadsheets and stuff, and that's amazing. And you just have to find what works for your business, your family, your farm, and you got to be plotting for the future. And part of the plot for the future is, what if we aren't dairy farming? And that's a big, scary question. And it's almost a harder question. And being able to make sure that when we make steps or do things, if dairy farming isn't part of it, how do we make that work? How do we make that work for the next generation or the generation after that? And not chaining them to a decision was very important too. So I don't know if I answered your question, but you can see it's complex.
It is complex. And a lot of the questions I'm asking, I don't think are, one sentence answers.
That's good, because I'm not a one sentence person at this point.
You're doing great. So when I was reading about the farm and the efforts that you're doing, biogas was new to me. So last night I went down a deep rabbit hole of researching biogas and how it's made, and I think it's really interesting. And I'm fascinated. And the first time it was also the first time I'd ever heard the term agri energy. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's kind of an awkward word, but the idea of taking, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but taking cow manure, basically adding microbes to it in an oxygenless environment. It then somehow creates, methane, but a methane that has a different type of CO2 in it. So it's actually not a greenhouse gas that's then used for energy purposes. Is that the gist of it?
So there are many gists to how it is done. And if you're looking for the science, I am not your gal. But what it does, and there are many ways, like agri-energy, Exer Agri-Energy is actually a company here in Maine, on a farm in Maine, a dairy farm in Maine, that actually currently possesses the only dairy digester in the state of Maine. We're hoping to have the second one here in the next few years through a partnership with Summit. But this is a technology that's been around for a very long time. And basically, like you said, it is capturing the methane. And yes, you can feed it. Sometimes you can, and that's another opportunity for food waste to find a home as opposed to going to a landfill. But the gist of it is taking that methane and catalyzing it for something else, whether it's to create electricity or to create a natural gas. And there are examples all throughout the United States of that being done. There are many Cabot farms actually throughout the Northeast in New York that have this technology and use it. Our butter plant actually runs on manure. And I hate to say, I'm pretty sure that everybody at Cabot's probably going, "Oh my God, don't say the poop is with the butter." It's not, folks. It's not, but it is powered by the methane that comes from one of our dairy farms. So, it's amazing, and it's an investment in our agriculture is what it is, and it's a utilization of a tool that's available to us. I mean, one of the things that we have to be able to do in this world to make sure that there is many, 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 many tomorrows and that they are not unlivable, underwater, on fire, that sort of thing. What we have to do is we have to find better ways of doing what we do. And a lot of times it just is a matter of looking around and seeing that we have all of these opportunities and all of these riches right here. I mean, we can do this. And it's just one of the many uses for manure. Manure can be used to make fabric. Manure can be used to make all kinds of things. And they can even make potable water. Okay. So
interesting.
It is. I mean, it's we need to learn to live with what we have and make what we're living with better. And renewable energy from agriculture is just one step along the way. And you get so many other benefits back. Like we will be recycling bedding. We will be, we're creating another circle of life within a farm. And a dairy farm has so many circles of life. We're recycling so much and feeding the soil better is what's one of the opportunities that this will provide us. We'll be able to utilize less products when it comes to bedding our cows. We'll be able to share the energy that's going on. We'll be doing all these things and still managing to feed our community locally. And the more that these projects happen, the more that we're going to figure out how to scale it down, because while our farm is one of the largest in the state of Maine, it's still pretty small compared to some of the largest farms in the United States. But those large farms are the minority. There's 34,000 dairy farms in the United States, and over 85% of them are small farms. But this type of technology and this type of project in this country is usually reserved for larger applications because of the cost and efficiency. So the more we figure out ways to do it on either a communal or community or cooperative level, like our operation here will be the partnership. We will be one of many dairy farms providing the manure to this. But there are other opportunities to scale it down so that other farms that want to make electricity or power their neighborhood can, without it costing an exorbitant amount of money, an out of reach amount of money with no return, and be able to appreciate a return on their investment, which is something that is new and different for dairy farming. ROIs don't usually come, with dollar signs. So, so that's really important, and finding different tools. And I do want to say one other thing though. I mean, while this is a really great opportunity for dairy farms of our size and of all sizes, it needs to be noted that just because a farm doesn't have this technology, isn't using digester technology, doesn't mean that they're not sustainable, doesn't mean that they're not environmentally friendly. It doesn't mean that they're not net zero. I mean, 34,000 dairy farms in the United States, like I said, 85% of them are small. A good number of those dairy farms are probably net zero or better because they're small and the way they practice. That being said, a lot of our large farms are amazing at what they do when it comes to sustainability and it comes to balancing all of that. It's not a size; it's how you do it.
Jenni, I'm gonna have to have you back on again. Sometimes there's so much I want to talk to you about.
I'm sorry.
No, we're getting tight on time. But I've loved the conversation, and there's just so much depth, I think, to the stuff you're doing that it deserves more time. And one of the things I have to ask, it's off topic a bit, but and it's a little bit more lighthearted. But like, what's the best? How do you make the best grilled cheese? I imagine you're a grilled cheese queen over there. So what do I need to do to make just a kick-ass grilled cheese sandwich?
Okay, I really personally think that you have to use a thick bread. I like a nice thick bread, but not a really crusty hard one. You can make the crust easily. I'm a big fan of the smear of mayo. Don't come at me with Miracle Whip. I mean, that's just not happening. But you take the mayo and you smear that on the outside. Don't fool with the butter, okay? That's what's going to create that nice melty crust. On the inside, you're going to use Cabot because it's so good. Sure, if you want to throw something fun in there like a Havarti or a Gruyere or anything else like that that's really super gooey, go ahead, be my guest. But I'm suggesting right here and now for everybody, just go with that Cabot. Seriously sharp. It's really great. And I like mustard on mine, but maple syrup is a nice touch too.
Oh, amazing. So that's a pro tip between the mayo and the maple syrup, though I had never considered either of those, but definitely going to do that next time. And the last thing I want to end on, I spent some time the other day reading through your blog. And one of the pages I found, it was from a New Year's post, and it was really around resolve and resolutions and sort of speaking through those a bit. And you have this quote on there that I love, and I wanted to just quickly read it. And it says, the gist of it is, if you resolve to be a giver, an advocate, and to be happy, you are giving the world a better you and make the world a better place. And I thought that was just so beautifully said. So I would love to hear, how you're embracing that sort of mantra and that resolve versus a resolution to a to-do list.
I think one of the hardest things that people have to realize, and I know it's not fair to say this, but I think a lot of women have this trouble, and I think about it a lot, is we don't listen to the flight attendant enough. You have to secure your own oxygen mask before you help anybody else. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you resolve, and I've tried to do that, I've tried to make sure that I understand that I can't fix anything. I can't make anything better if I don't make sure that I am the best I can be. And I can't go out there half fed. I can't go out there half energized. I can't go out there half believing something. I have to really focus on me being certain that this is important, that I am ready and I can do it. And that's what I do. I mean, I try to every day do mm-hmm. that. I don't succeed every time. But I know that I may not be able to fix everything that's wrong with my local food system, but I know that I can work really hard on me and my part in that local food system. And then I can go rattle the cages. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I have to do it simultaneously or in tandem, but it's important. And I guess it's important to do that, and be certain of stuff. Well, that's eloquent, right? Be certain of stuff.
Well, I think it speaks to confidence. Be confident in your pursuit, whether they're difficult or not, but just knowing and embracing it. I think that's what I hear from what you're saying. And I know you have a lot going on, but just as a reader who went through everything, I think I encourage you to pick it back up, because I think you have a great, powerful voice, and you seem to really cultivate a community through that platform. So I encourage you to keep it up, and also our listeners to go look for it on the web. So with that, I want to thank you so much for spending the last hour with us and talking through everything. Really enjoyed it. Really, really inspiring stuff. We're definitely going to have you back on. So I want to really dig into your advocacy work. I think you have some really great ideas around diversity, how we can make farming more diverse. So we'll definitely be hearing from us again. But again, thank you.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed speaking with you and talking with you.
There you have it, the impressive Jenni Tilton-Flood. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. I find her commitment to improving farm practices and how she's been building on from previous generations to be incredibly impressive. Thank you for being patient and bearing with the farm machinery in the background. I know it can be a little distracting, but personally, I think it adds a little bit to the authenticity. As usual, please rate and share this podcast. If you have any recommendations or feedback, please email us at hi@weareunconquered.co.